Hello, welcome to the July 31st, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in a live chat field, or questions can be submitted in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon not be possible with the number of questions that come in. We will go through all of the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could perhaps avoid repeating the questions, that would be appreciated. We should have an index and when asking questions, it's always helpful if you could specify which Cubase version you're using. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg levels of programs. So if you have Wavelab Elements, Wavelab Go, Wavelab Pro, etc. Also, if you could tell the version number of the software, so if it's like Cubase 13, 14, or 15. Also, the operating system that you're using, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends, where you could navigate quickly to particular topics with the timestamps. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website, so you could peruse through over 45,000 different topics in 2,000 hours of live streams. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience overall. And we want to give a special thanks to them. We'll give an extra round of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information if you want to find presets, tutorials, links, downloads, templates. So all sorts of great information there that's available. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'm the host of the live stream. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching the live stream live or even afterwards, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always interesting. Today is the last live stream of the month. That means we'll go for about 2 hours instead of our typical up to 4 hours. In the last 2 hours, we will do a Zoom social meetup. So it's a great way to meet other people in the Club Cubase community. It's always fascinating discussions that go on. So I just posted the link to it. I'll try to post a link every 30 minutes or so. I will also, just for people sometimes that are watching it live, I will go ahead and show the meeting invitation as well here. Sometimes the chats don't come up to later, but let's say if we want to come over here and open up. So here we could see the meeting ID and the passcode for the Zoom. So sometimes the chat doesn't show up for a little bit, but for people that are watching this, here is the meeting ID and the passcode. This is not recorded. If you're watching this afterwards, this is only going to happen on July 31st from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m.-ish on East Coast time. So if you're watching this, after July 31st, this may be irrelevant, but I just wanted to show the meeting ID and the passcode for people wanting to get into who want to get the credentials from here. And you could always email me if you want the Zoom meeting invite. You could always send an email to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So with that, let's go ahead and begin, since we have only 2 hours to get through questions today. All right, so we see from Flyv in Winnipeg, Canada. This is Vince here. I'm having issues with my Arturia keyboard in Cubase Pro 15. Keep sending MIDI in and out activity from faders, I think I'm not touching. I tried to reinstall, now it's a bit better, but still does it randomly at times. Any clues? It's not that old. So some devices may incorporate something called active sensing. So sometimes we could think of this as being more like a MIDI handshake. So let's say, like, for instance, my CC121, I'm going to come over here. I'll just choose its port. If we look at my MIDI activity lights here, we can see this little ping. And I'm not transmitting anything, but sometimes different MIDI controllers will send a MIDI message called active sensing. And it's basically just a little message saying, hey, I'm here. Look for me. Hey, I'm here. It's like a handshake. So you may see MIDI activity from some controllers that use active sensing. Yamaha products are kind of known for this, for employing this. So you may see the MIDI indicator lights show with that. If sometimes, I've seen some controllers that need to be recalibrated, especially if there's any motorized faders, sometimes recalibrating. But I would come over to, if you think that it's actually transmitting information, I would just go to like a MIDI part here, go to the MIDI inserts. And at this point, you could just go to the MIDI monitor. And at this point, we could see exactly. So if I move a controller or a knob, I could see exactly what information it is. So this would monitor all of the MIDI data. So if you just activate the track, see if you see any information coming in. Sometimes MIDI active sensing information may not show up here. Just see, but so just be aware that, it may not show up in the MIDI monitor, but if the faders are kind of errantly or transmitting MIDI CC messages in error, at that point it may, it would show up in the actual MIDI controller. Some controllers, by their design, so there's a lot of M audio controllers that, it's like, oh, my MIDI is out of tune. Why is that? And when people would move their modulation wheel, it would also move their pitch bend. And sometimes the pitch bend would be transmitting MIDI information in error, because that component was broken. So depending on the design of the keyboard, sometimes with where MIDI modulation and pitch bend are on the same board, like it's one piece, that can happen as well, and that could cause MIDI in and out activity to be registered. So try going again to the MIDI and go to the MIDI monitor and see exactly what you think right there. Okay. So we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. Great to see you on. See Stefan joining from Sweden. See Jazz Dude on. Always wonderful to have Jazz Dude with all of his work he does for the live streams. So appreciate it. We see Klaus Olsen joining from Malmo, Sweden. All right, we have Robert Higgins. Great to see you back from Morro Bay, California. I just saw a picture from Morro Bay. Looks like a beautiful place with a huge rock on the ocean there. Mountain, I guess. All right, we have Uno Momento joining from Finland, where he has thunderstorms today. We have VS Terranova joining from Amsterdam. All right, so we see from Wolfix CZ says, hello, Greg. Did you find out anything in my mail about expression maps, delay compensation, colliding? So I think, we discussed this in the last live stream towards the very end. So, some of if you have longer notes, those may, if you have notes with longer attack compensations, I think what most people are doing is, one, is just to use perhaps a separate track. I know in your email you said you wanted everything to, be on one single track, and it could do that. You could try to adjust the attack compensation as well to maybe make it a smaller value to see if it goes through as well. But we did go through it on the last live stream, so I'm not sure if you had a chance to see that. All right, so we have Walter Blackledge joining from St. Louis Club Cubase. Yeah, just got an email from Joe the other day. And we have Tim K joining from Zeiss in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Mark Raven's dog Stella and other pets that are nearby. We have Matt Elliston joining from the UK. Great. So we have Sustaniac joining from Germany. Welcome to the live stream. All right, so Robert Higgins asks, how do I nudge a frame at a time on a vocal track or instrument left or right using keyboard commands? Windows 11, do not want to have it snapped to a grid. All right, so there's a couple of ways to do this. One, there is a dedicated keyboard shortcut. Let me just plop a track back in. Okay, so let's say I have this particular event here. So if you go to your key commands, you're on Windows platform, might be under, I think you are, under the edit category. And then there's going to be, I think it's going to be under transport. You'll see kind of a nudge 1+1 frame or nudge -1 frame. So I will just assign this. So we could assign this to a particular keyboard shortcut. So if I want to come here, I will just say and assign keyboard shortcuts to that. So as soon as I come over here, we could say, we look at our event, we'll look at our start time. And now as I nudge, let's see if I could come here. It's not on transport, sorry that. Right, so that's going to move the playhead position. All right, so another way, so let's go ahead and I'll just remove those key commands quickly. Okay, so if we come over here, so if we want to, so let's go to our nudge palette. We're going to activate our nudge palette here. All right, so once we see our nudge palette, and again, we could just come right over here and we could say, okay, by default, it will say link to grid, but let's say I want to, in our nudge palette, we can come right over here and we'll say, I want to do this in time code. So let's say now I want the value to be 1 frame. All right, so now when I come over here and we go to nudge our values, so we look at our start time here, that I will actually just be nudging it 1 frame at a time. So if I switch my master time here to, say, time code, so we see that every time that I nudge, it's nudging it by 1 frame. Like so. So now I'm just using the key command control or command plus the right arrow or control command plus left arrow. And then we could just nudge that particular event by frame. So once we go to the nudging, if you just turn off link to grid, so this way our snap can be set, let's say, to when I move events, we could have it snap to the bar and beat. So when I come here, it's snapping. But now when I nudge, it's nudging by a frame. So you could nudge by 10 milliseconds, 1 millisecond, whatever time format you think is appropriate. All right, so you see, so I'm just saying I have a magnified zoom. So let me go ahead and I could get this. Sorry, thank you for. Let me see if I can fix this. Sorry. Let me see. I could go to my monitoring computer. See if I could. This. Let me. And watch it on a different computer. I just. Making some adjustments on the OBS here. Let me see. Helping. Sorry about this. Just got a new monitor yesterday. Hang on a second. I'm just going to do a quick look up on my end. Okay, just Googling this real quick. Apologies. Sorry, just Googling this so we can see the full screen. My apologies. Yeah, just 1 second. Watch a quick tutorial on this. See if we can fix this. I'll be right back. All right, I'm just gonna try monitoring this. Sorry about this. All right, maybe we just get this going. All right, I'll wait to see if it refreshes here. My apologies for this. All right, so I think I'm okay. Let me, Soren, if you want to send me a quick message, see that looks okay. Sorry about that. Let's go back to our normal and make sure that the audio is coming through. Okay. All right. So I think we're okay now. Sorry about that. Thank you, Soren, for letting me know. So appreciate that. All right. So let me just jump back to a question we were going over. Okay. So for nudging, I think there's a question that we were on. So let's say my main, and this is for Robert. So we have our main timeline here set to bars and beats. So you see that we're snapping directly here. Okay, thank you, Soren, for letting me know. All right, so when I come here, we could just say, so we're snapping to the beat, but when we right click, go to nudge. So make sure your nudge is active, and then you want to choose not where it's linked to grid, but you choose your time as time code, and then within your time code, you have subframe, quarter frame, half, 1 frame, 2 frames, 1 second. So let's say we want to nudge it by 1 frame. Now I can select that, hold down the control or command key, and just use your right arrows. And now we are just nudging by 1 frame to the left and right. So if I just want to click our time code here, so we can see our time code position is 7 seconds, 5 frames. So now as I nudge, you can see that we are nudging in frames right there. So make sure that you have the nudge palette active and checked. It may be turned off by default. And it may say link to grid. So now we could have the grid, our main timeline, so we could decouple the nudging value based on from the primary grid. So we can say now 1 frame and then control or command plus, once you have the event selected, plus the left and right arrows. All right. Thank you, Soren, again for letting me know about the screen problems. All right. Great. So we see that Brian Sawyer joining from Yuma, Arizona. Hatfield just jumped. Okay, so we have Frankie Change Music says from Indonesia, is early on switch from Cubase from other software. Welcome to the live streams. Okay, so you see Jazzy was kind enough to put the passcode and Zoom meeting info in the Discord for today. We have Jason J. Bundy joining from Seattle, one of my favorite cities to travel to. John Costigan from cloudy Wisconsin. All right, so we see going back to Vince's question about the MIDI information that's coming in. So I would check just coming over here to the MIDI inserts of a track, and and just put on the MIDI monitor plugin. And with the MIDI monitor plugin, as you move a parameter or if MIDI is being transmitted in, we could see that MIDI information coming directly in there. So on the track, just as a MIDI insert. So once we select a MIDI or instrument track, you can just come right over to your MIDI inserts. So, and at that point, select our instrument track, and then you'll see from the MIDI inserts, just load up the MIDI monitor. Sorry for having my screen off earlier. All right, so we see Sable Winters on, joining from Bay Area, California. All right, so we see a question from Don M 1547. Does the Cubase 15 60-day trial have limited functionality? So it's full functionality. It just the only limit in the functionality is after 60 days, the license will no longer be valid. But you could save, do projects, save projects, everything. Okay, so we see Brian checking in from Alabama. Is there a way to punch in MIDI tracks, example piano, and record over all MIDI information? Yep, so let's come over here. Great, so let's say I have existing MIDI data here on this particular track. All right, so if we go to the bottom here, we can see MIDI record modes. So at this point, we could choose to make new parts. We could merge or replace. So if I wanted to replace something, I could come over here. I'll punch in, punch out. So we could just, at that point, replace our existing recordings. You could also just come over here and choose to make new parts. So at this point, I could say, okay, I'm going to do a punch in, let's say at measure 3 through 4. So I want to just okay, so as soon as I'm going to enable punch in this time, so we'll record. All right, so when we do that, we could have like these two events that are merged, and then we could just kind of come over here, see our original, and if we wanted to mute those particular events, they could be underlying, or we could, again, just see our existing. So once you kind of go to the center, you could hit like U, or you could just come right over here and go back. So we could say, okay, let's go to our overlap. So at this point, I could just come right here and say remove overlaps, and then the underlying MIDI information is deleted. So you could choose to kind of keep your existing parts there and whatever you kind of recorded. It could be layered on top, and then when you go to the center area, you could just choose to remove overlaps, and then the underlying stuff will be erased. So that could be kind of a two-step process if you wanted to maintain parts of the track and let those kind of exist still. So those MIDI record modes, you'll find them right here in the transport, or if we go directly to the transport, we'll see MIDI record modes here. So we say, okay, here's our MIDI record modes. We could create new parts, we could merge, or replace the existing MIDI recording. Let me know if that's helpful for you. See, you've been saying new monitor. Yeah, so finally got my display monitor from Steinberg yesterday. So All right, so we're seeing John Barry, who has an Arturia controller, says his does it as well. Says if you're in DAW mode, try switching to Keylab mode and see if that makes any changes. All right, so we see says from YHY88, how can I do smooth pitch automation inside the software? Could you please explain how to use Vari Audio or pitch curves practically? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. We're going to have a vocal here. So let me just come over. So we'll double click on our vocal file, and then we're going to activate, we'll have our Vari Audio tab. So now when I come over here, we've done the analysis. So I click on this button here, and we have our Vari Audio. I'm going to just go ahead and make it full screen. And let me just activate Windows. All right, so now that we're here in full screen,
do you recall the day we first met? That was a long first met.
All right, so now what we can do is just come over. So now there's two different control modes in Vari Audio. There's going to be a default smart controls. And as we hover over, we think of this as being kind of like a smart tool for Vari Audio. So when we go to our default controls, I can come here, and if a pitch is flat or sharp, I could go to the bottom and we could correct the pitch. We could also choose a different pitch like so. Our top screen here will allow us to straighten the pitch. So if we wanted this to sound very processed and mechanical, if you're going for that type of vocal sound.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
Right, so you have the ability to straighten the pitch of the selected events. We could also adjust the timing to kind of warp and change the rhythmic characteristics. Once we go to, we could also show all of the smart controls. So if I now come over here, I can say, okay, I want to adjust, when I come over here, I could tilt the pitch. So if we have the singer that's going flat at a specific point, we could move this little diamond and say, okay, let's say our singer lost diaphragm support and they just drifted flat at the end of a long note. We can just come over here and adjust and move this center point for our tilt. So we could have tilt. We could adjust also formant. So if you move it up like a perfect fifth and you want to change kind of the characteristic of the voice so it doesn't sound very munchkinized, we could also adjust our volume. Now, as we kind of work with transitions, we could also have these little anchor points set up, these triangles, that as we hover over, all these controls are kind of revealed. And so now I could just move these transitions. So if we wanted to tame the vibrato but keep the natural transitions between the notes, we could do that. So you can see I've just straightened the vibrato in the middle of the note, and when we're transitioning to a different pitch where we may have stuff like that, we can at that point choose to not affect those particular events. But like super quick, if you wanted to, just come over here and say, okay, I just want to, correct the pitch for all those. I could just come to this bottom. I could select multiple notes and just come over here and say, okay, I want to take all these notes and and you could just kind of lock it into place there. If you have a scale assistant, like let's say if you're using the chord track, we can now automatically quantize the pitches to the scale, and we could also snap pitch editing. So if I know now I can't move it to a note that's outside of the chord, so we can snap it rhythmically or harmonically to the chord track as well. So kind of as you hover over different events, so the top, we could adjust your vibrato. We could move different elements to be in tune by going to our bottom choice here. If we hold down the shift key, we can freely move your events without having any snap applied to it. So if I have this note and we think it's a little out of tune, now I could just come here and move that note so it snaps to be in tune. So those are some of the things that you could do with the very audio. Let me know if that's helpful for you. Great. All right, wonderful to see Captenergy music on. So we see Rick from Whittier, California, where it's hot and muggy air quality. It's lousy there. It's Bratman Studio. All right, we see Nick joining from Essex, UK. All right, so we see Alex checking in from Mojave, Arizona, Kingman, Arizona. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see, okay, MIDI monitor is all over the place. What should I do to stop it? So one of the things you could do is just make sure that, see what MIDI message it is. So if you are seeing a lot of different activities, like if it's the same controller, so let's say if we see the MIDI monitor, and I'm just moving like a fader here repeatedly, we could just see that the fader here is CC2 breath. So we could now, if we just, and what I would do is just move the faders and say, okay, this particular fader, this is the one that's acting up. If I move this all the way down, this fader, or all the way to the top, does that stop it? Is it kind of stuck in the middle? So another thing you could do is also, if it's still just spouting out MIDI information, you could try to reset it. That will send kind of an all notes off message and see if it's still continuing. And if it's still kind of just spitting out MIDI data, then it's probably going to be an issue with the controller, and Cubase is showing what information is coming in. And if it's like, you're like, okay, this is a MIDI CC that is, super, I'm never going to use it. You could go to your preferences or settings. And when you go to MIDI, you could actually just filter out specific CCs. So if we come here to your MIDI filter, you can say, okay, I need to filter out, whatever MIDI message, and that way you could block it from coming in. But the MIDI monitor should give you an idea of what parameter is being transmitted in, and then I would move the physical controls to see if it is mapping to a physical controller on your controller. All right, so Soren says, I have concerns about ARA vocals from third-party tool and tempo changes. It seems the vocals need to be rendered and then tempo changes can be made to the audio, but it is trouble for me. Is there going to be developments in ARA to allow tempo changes? So, when we're dealing with ARA, so if I come over here and let's take this particular track, a lot of times when we're doing an ARA setting, so I come over here, let's say, okay, I'm going to take it over to WaveLab. So now when I'm doing editing in WaveLab, we can just choose, let's see if I, let's do like spectral layers here. So you did. All right, so if I'm doing editing here, this audio is basically going to be in a different environment. So this is an extension of the program. This program, Spectralayers, Wavelab, whatever your third-party tool, it may not, recognize that tempo, that the audio can play back in a different tempo than what the native tempo is of it. So a lot of these tools don't have tempo capabilities, and their function is to do specific editing tasks. So it may not automatically. So if I was wanting to do tempo changes, I would do all of perhaps my ARA editing. I would render that, or just come over to once we're done with the extension, I would make the extension permanent. If you wanted to always have access to the original file, I would come over here. I would duplicate the track version. I would render this in place. So let's say if I come over here, we'll say it's going to bounce the selection. All right, so now when I go back to this and I double click on my previous, we could choose to just load up the extension on, let's go back here. So now I could have one extension that's in ARA mode, so I could do edits, and then if I needed to go back to my original, I could just double click here and be in my sampler. Let me clear my throat. So I could be in my sample editor. So it's the same track, but we could, consider rendering it out, and then you could, take the same track. But a lot of the ARA extensions may not be aware of, or handling of playing back audio that's in a different tempo. So, you could always keep your existing file, render it and do your editing there if needed. And then if you make the track extension permanent, then it could be, you could apply musical mode for that. Great. Once again, great to see Rasta Nick on from Essex. Glad you can make it today. Great. So we see Val joining from Austria, Vienna. We see David M. from Liverpool. Just talking to my colleague in Manchester this morning. Had a great meeting with him. All right, we see that it's 40 degrees Celsius in Vienna. It's got to be warm. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer just joining from Mission Viejo, California. I'm going to go ahead and post the meeting info again. Great. So we see Tim. So we see Michael Graybill says hello from Dallas. It's only 1,278 hours left until fall. I assume it's hot in Dallas. All right, let me jump to a question that was mailed in. All right, so we had a question is how to show events and handle track colors on folder tracks or group tracks. Sometimes when I change, when I have a color on a track and I put it into a folder track, it changes to the color of the folder track, and I may want it to stay the same. Also, I noticed that there is no event to be seen in the folder with group track, and I just see kind of a blank space, and this is different behavior than what was in Cubase 14. All right, so let's take a quick look at this. So we'll just start off, do a new project here. All right, so I'm going to add just a number of instrument tracks. Or let's just add some audio tracks here. Okay, so let's say we record audio into all of these tracks. Okay, so let's say I want to put all of these tracks into, let's say I have a folder track, so I'm going to add a folder track now. All right, and let's say for this folder track, I want my folder track to, let's say, we'll change the color of our folder track here. So we'll make it kind of a bluish color. So now when I take all of these tracks, a lot of people had wanted to, when we make a folder with group channel, just to be able to have all of the tracks that are in a folder to be the same color. So now when I move these over, we open this up. There's a preference for this. I may have turned it off. But when we come over to event display folders, so we have this apply color of folder tracks automatically. Okay, so I'm going to choose, right now I had that set to never. I'm going to choose always. So I'm going to undo that. So now when I copy all of these particular tracks into our folder with group track, we'll see that their colors all change to be a unified color like so. Now, one of the other, so that's going to be in a preference. So we come over here, let's go to, again, your preferences or settings. We'll come over to folders, and it's apply color of folder track automatically. All right, now let's say if we don't see the particular events on our folder, so if I have all of these particular events and we close the folder and we don't see any of the containing events, we could just right click and then we have a show data on tracks. So we could say never show. So it may be if you're seeing a blank folder with no content that's reflected, we could do that, and that kind of mimics the behavior of group tracks that didn't have events, but since it's a folder with a group track, so it's kind of coupling the particular elements, we can now come over here, right click on the track, and we can say always show data, and we could also say, show event details as well. So these are just empty, and I'll show you. So we could choose to show automation only or show event details. And I'll show we'll uncheck that. So I'll show different project where you have like multi-track drums. All right, so let's say we come over here to our folder. So we close the folder, we don't see any content. So when we see our content on the folder, we make this a little bigger. We could see all of the tracks with the waveform representations on the particular event. But again, if we right click and we say, don't show event details, we'll see this is kind of blank. We can see that we have multiple tracks there, but if you want to see the MIDI information or show the waveforms, so it gives you a better idea. Again, right click on the track, go to show data on folder tracks and select show details. And if you have this setting to never show data, it will be blank in that area. So again, just right click and there's where you can show your data and show event details. Great. All right, so we see DJ Henke on. Klaus is waiting for his apple strudel from Val. All right, so we see how can I make a bass or a piano slide up smoothly from low to high pitch using transposition or automation? Can you show this practically? So a lot of times that's going to be, it could be based upon the actual instrument itself. So let's come over. Activate this project here. It's usually not like a MIDI functionality, but it's going to be kind of based on what the instrument is set up for. All right, so say I have a synth bass here and I'm using Retrolog. So Retrolog and Hallian instruments can have kind of the same functionality. So we could just put this into glide mode and we have our glide time. So once we're in monophonic mode, I could come over here and just say. So let's come over here. We'll make it a slow glide time. So I have this note. And let's go ahead and just make our sustain. So if I wanted to be like a super long glide time, and you could have this like in finger mode. So the sampler track also has similar capabilities. So just quick. Great. So let's say if I have this particular note, I'll open up. Let's come here to my sampler control. So I'm going to take this note from a virtual instrument and drag it over. And again, we could kind of do the same functionality here. We would just say, okay, let's go do our pitch. And then once we come over here, we could put it to our glide mode. And we could also put this into monophonic mode by clicking here. And we could adjust the amount of the glide time. And we could also put this into like a legato mode so I can, without the sample restarting every time I hold a note down. I'll put this on like a faster glide time so you can hear it. So now when I hit the next note, if you look at the keyboard here, it's not going to re-trigger the sample from the start, but I could. So you could do stuff like that. So it's usually not necessarily MIDI that's doing it, but the instrument that has the glide mode that's kind of built in as a feature. So let me know if that makes sense for you, YH_Y88. All right, so we see from Vince says it also has a red letter overlapping pitches, and the only way I can make it sound is the pads not on the keys. So make sure that you don't have, if you have it set up for MIDI remote, like let's say if we come over to MIDI remote here, and let's get to like your studio setup, make sure that you have like the correct like MIDI mapping. So if, some controllers may take some of the functions like transport and, some of the sliders and use that as MIDI remote, but not use the pads or the keys. So it could be if you have it configured for MIDI remote, and sometimes you may have multiple ports. So on my Nectar controller here, when I go to open it up, I can see that I have, my P4 MIDI in, an aux in, an SAL in. So you may have a separate MIDI port for control versus a separate MIDI port for like the actual keys on the keyboard. So if you go to this setup here, so let's say, if you just go to your setup, make sure that you have the correct, if you're using it as like a MIDI remote device or a generic remote, make sure that you have the right MIDI port connection selected there as well. All right, so we have Anton Welling joining us from Herenberg in the Netherlands. Thanks for being here. All right, so we see says, hello everyone, I made a multi-sample of my hardware synths and that file is ready for Halligan 7. How do I import the file into Halligan 7? I have the full version, thank you. All right, I think I may have a file we could use to start with. Okay. Okay, so let's say in this case, I sampled a bass here, and I have it labeled. So let's say, okay, I want to come here. Let's go to A string. So I have all of these samples in a project here. All right, and then let's say, okay, now I do B flat. All right, so we have all of our different samples here in this instance. I have it all broken down by string. So we can say, okay, let's open up. All right, so let's go ahead and open up a brand new instance of Halligan 7. Okay, so we'll just do a new sample instrument. Okay. I think let's just take these particular files. Okay, I'm going to drag them. Now, on the files themselves, I have like the pitch. All right, so I'm just dragging it to like an initial sample instrument. All right, so we could say we want to get the root key from the sample text from the sample name. Okay. And let's say now I want velocity to be from 0 to 127. So I'll hit OK. Okay. And now when I'm over here, let's go to, so we'll just come over to our mapping. And now each of these is automatically been over here. Let's take our, all right, so now as we do this, we have all right, so if I wanted to take all of these, let's go ahead and we'll just zoom in here. All right, so if we wanted to adjust the velocity, I could now put in other sample layers directly on top of it, but we can see here that it's automatically. So again, if we undo our changes, so then if we wanted to make like a new layer, so let's say, okay, I want this. I think if we turn this into like a zone, so really all you have to do is, drag the audio straight over onto the name. And then once you get to the point, so, as you do that, just select all of your files and you'll get this little prompt here, and you could just say, get the root key from the name. And you could also read, start and end, gain. So you could just come right over here. Just to start that process in Halligan is you just start from a new sample instrument. And now you could be all set and just. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And you could create different layer zones, different key switches as well. All right, so we see from Rick from Bratman Studio. Hey, Greg, has anyone made a controller map for the Arturia key step? I would check, I'm sure that someone probably has. Arturia controllers are pretty popular, but it could be, if you go to the Steinberg forums, there's a kind of a repository, a collection of different MIDI remote surface, profiles, so that you could use those to, and just simply download those. So it's a place where users upload different MIDI remote scripts that they've made. Okay, so we see at 209, it says, hi, everybody, just thought to duck my head in here for a bit. What's the topic being discussed right now? So you just, so we're just showing how to make samples inside of Halligan. All right, and we see from Permanent Green, he says, Greg, I used a third-party auto sampler and it has the option for Halligan 7, so should I not be able just to open that Halligan file and add all the samples? Will be all assigned and ready to play. So I'm not sure what auto sampler you've used, like in the past, what I had done, like when sampling instruments, is I would just have like a MIDI note and I would do like, 8 velocities. Like I was sampling a drum machine not too long ago, an old drum machine of mine before it died. And I did each note and I spaced out each note chromatically. I did like 8 velocity levels so that I could just play and record, and it would have enough silence that I could use detect silence to break all the samples apart, and everything was kind of renamed. So all of that. So I'm not sure like what all the third-party auto sampler does, but something to so I'm not. If you let me know which one it is, I might be able to investigate a little bit further with that. But if you have like so I found it having like a Cubase project where the project would play the MIDI, it would capture the audio would be named as well. That once you kind of set up a third project, that could automate the whole process of sampling as well. So. All right, and we see John Barry just mentioned, just says that Halion 7.5 is coming. So yeah, it'll be coming next week. So I think there'll be some exciting new features, I think, on Tuesday. So I may not have all the new features mastered by Tuesday, but you could definitely check that out. I think it's the 30 years of EST. So, and they're going to be doing that, and so with the release of Halion, there might be a sales promotion. So we'll see what happens next week. But yeah, so Halion 7.5 will be coming along as well. You see Jazz Dude is kind enough to share the user MIDI remote scripts. All right, let me go to another question that was asked in advance. All right. It says, question, I use Cubase Pro 15 for guitar practice and transcribing. What would you suggest is the best way to actually slow down a track from which I would transcribe a lead guitar without changing the pitch? Okay, so there's a couple different approaches for this. All right, so let's say we have this as our project. All right, so the easiest way to slow it down without changing the pitch is to switch the actual select tool function. And if you just hit 1 a couple of times on your computer keyboard, you'll see that the cursor will change to one that has a little clock. You could also just click here and switch this mode to sizing applies time stretch. So now when I size an event like this, it's just automatically time stretched, and it's going to be the same pitch but slower. I gave you my lucky number. You won't give me the time. Now, if you want it to be like a specific BPM, so let's say I want this to come here. I'm going to do, if it's a recording of live musicians, their tempo is probably going to fluctuate. So what I would do to be kind of, very accurate with it is I would select the event. So let's say if we're listening to our tempo here, we'll hear our click track, which has no correlation with the actual music. So I want to make a correlation between the tempo and the track. So I'm going to come over here to my tempo track and do a tempo detection. Now I can close this and say, okay, I want my time signature, we'll make it 4/4. pickup note. Let me just check. All right, so we're going to put our downbeat right here. Okay, just at the beginning for song. Okay, so now we have kind of our... All right, so this has fluctuating tempos, even though it sounds like it's steady. So what I'm going to do now is to this file, we'll go to the audio menu and say set definition from tempo. And now what I could do is say, okay, I want this to be all slower. So let's say we're roughly at 124. So right now we're fluctuating. I'm going to say, okay, let's make this play at 108 beats a minute so I could learn the song. And now I get transcribed easier. If we want to go back to our original tempo, now I want it to be slower. And back to our original tempo. So you get, so if you want it to be like really accurate and say, okay, I want to transcribe it at 88 beats a minute and check it. Or we could come over here conversely and just say, okay, I want to keep those same tempo changes. I could just take the tempo map itself and lower the tempo map and still have the tempo fluctuations. So we go back to original, or if you want it to be just like a steady tempo, you could set it like that. And go back to our original. So now you can figure out the solo when it's slower. And back to. So again, if you want to be like quick and dirty about it, you could just do the sizing applies time stretch. Or if you wanted to be like really accurate, you could select a file, do from the tempo track under project menu, do the tempo detection, come over here to audio and do the and choose set definition from tempo, and then you could just type in a tempo and the audio will kind of follow the tempo from the transport. All right, so we see permanent green. Says a sample robot, which can choose your file to be ready for Halion 7, Yamaha, Montage, Waldorf. Very easy user track. Check that out. Thanks for letting us know. Great, Jazz Dude shared the remote scripts. All right, so we see a question from Bratman Studio. Will Halion 7.5 upgrade cost for people with the 7.5 update. I think it's going to be free, but we'll find out exactly on Tuesday. Okay, so we see Flyvy has sent a video of his MIDI problems. So I'll take a quick look at it maybe as we're migrating on the Zoom and take a look at it. Thanks for sending the video. Okay, so we see keys, faders, and knobs show nothing in the MIDI monitor. So I think it's probably, maybe it's going to be, maybe you have the wrong port set if you have it configured as a MIDI remote or generic remote or a Mackie or Mackie control device. Okay, let me jump back over to some more questions. All right, so we had a question. In the studio setup, audio connections, Cubase shows the inputs of my RME Fireface UCX as, for example, analog 1, parenthesis 1, parenthesis, and so forth. The number of brackets is not causing a problem, but it used to be different. And when choosing an input for recording a track, the number in brackets makes things harder to read. How do I get rid of the like bracket 1, bracket 2, and so forth? So it could be like if you have multiple devices from the same interface. So let's say if we go to your audio connections window here, and so here we can see, if sometimes you may notice that if you have, like, I'm not sure if you have more than one RME device connected at a time. So, some interfaces could be daisy chained. So if it's, usually most USB ones are not able to, but FireWire ones, PCI cards, Thunderbolt interfaces, so depending on what interface you're using, if you have two of the same audio interfaces, they may show up as input 1, and the bracket could be 1 and the bracket could be 2, indicating that the 1 is from unit 1 and the bracket in 2 is maybe a secondary unit. So if you have two different units, that's what is delineating, what's indicating what is in the very first input, what is in the first interface, and what is on the second physical interface. So generally, that's why that is showing it. Now, how that is reported to Cubase when we see the name here, Cubase doesn't assign this. This is how the core audio or the ASIO driver was written to show this. Once we have the input defined here, we could rename. So if we add a bus here, we could give it a name, so we'll say July 31st, input 1. So if we add a connection, we could rename the inputs in software, and then we would choose the input-output designation, and these names are coming from the audio interface driver. They're not coming from Cubase. This is just what the driver is reporting to as an ASIO driver on Windows or as core audio on Mac OS. So I don't think that this could be changed because this is exactly what's coming in from, what is coming in as being reported by the driver. Okay. All right, so we have Peter Raymond checking in from Winnipeg also. All right, so we see John Barry just says there's a new controller for Cubase from Artec called Flow. Very interesting, uses new API in 15. Has a great learn function. We're checking out the video, similar to Stream Deck, but own software. All right, so we see from George, it says, thanks a lot, Greg. I'll look into the installation of the Army interface. There seems to be multiple installation on my Windows computer. Yeah, so, make sure that in Cubase that you're using the, one other thing to check is if you're here, if you go to, your audio system, you may have different names. If you go to the audio system, if you're using the dedicated ASIO driver for the RME, or if you're using, sometimes you may have like a Steinberg, depending on your operating system. So if I had to switch to built-in, or you may see a Steinberg ASIO, built-in ASIO that is, designed to work with audio interfaces that don't have ASIO drivers. And with that, it may have different naming conventions. So make sure that when you go to your audio system here, that it is actually set for your Army ASIO driver, and not like going through something like ASIO for all or Steinberg built-in ASIO as well, because that could change the naming conventions as well from the ASIO driver to like a Windows driver. All right, so we see Soul Sound Official just saying hi to everyone. Let me take a quick look, see if we could get to Vince's video that he sent. So go to my, don't get the Club Cubase emails on my phone more. All right. Go ahead. Okay. So it's an E1 that's being triggered. All right. So just rewind just a little bit here. So make sure if this is the keyboard that is set up for the Arturia in the MIDI remote, make sure that you don't have like an E1 key assigned anywhere. So I see that we have the tractor control set up there. I see that we have, when we go to this, it looks like this might be your, let's see if we can see it at the beginning. So it's just a note on, note off message. Overlapping pitches. So I bet it's a MIDI remote. So, again, just come over here. And when we go into like your MIDI remote settings, see what happens if you go to your Arturia controller, and let's say if you go to the script, and I think you could just, disable the script. So let's say if I want to come over here to my Nano Control 2, I have this kind of set up. So see what happens if you, change the MIDI configuration, or if you just disable the control strip, if that changes the behavior, and that would lead me to think that there is a control in the MIDI remote that is causing that E1 message to be transmitted. So. All right, so you see from Tim K says that I have a mini lab and a few key lab units. I found the best results using the Arteria MIDI mapping, but I don't know if there's anything factory to the key step units. All right, and we see Flyv says he got the knobs working. All right, so we see from DJ Henke says in earlier versions of Cubase, if you wanted to make several MIDI channels at once and name them MIDI O2, the naming would start with O2 to like say 08. Now the naming is like MIDI O2, 01, and so on. All right, so sometimes we get this with like a multi-timbral instrument. Let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to start with a multi-timbral instrument here of Hallian 7. So let's do Hallian Sonic. Okay, so now if I had like a multi-timbral instance, so I'm going to come over here. Okay, I want that there. Let's. And we'll have it say channel 2. We have channel 3. All right, so say we have, we have an instance. So now when I go to play a particular instrument here, wait, let me just check. All right, so I can say, all right, but I don't hear like the saxophone, the bomb fall, or the synth sound here. All right, so if I wanted to add tracks and have those automatically added when I go to add MIDI tracks with an instrument track selected. So what it used to be in earlier versions that it would, if you're doing it from an instance of, with an instrument track selected, that it would automatically increment the MIDI channel. But there were lots of people that would add a MIDI track going to an external device, and it was added to channel 2 automatically, and then they would get confused as to why the MIDI wasn't going to their external device. So here we could just choose the output group routing. So you have to manually change it because people had complained that when we did it before, that they would add a MIDI track going to an external instrument, not doing polyphonic mode. But now when I increment this and I say add track, all of these will now be set directly to, and we can see this automatically just show up. And when we select our different instruments, that selects it within Hallian. So that way it will increment. But again, there was many people, I have a VST instrument. Now I want the next MIDI track to go out to my hardware. And instead of being on MIDI channel 1, it would default to MIDI channel 2. So it created issues and people had complained about that. So now when you want to add MIDI tracks to extend a multi-timbral instrument, you would just set the MIDI channel manually. So I know it's different, but again, other people had issues with it going to the wrong MIDI channel by default. All right, and we see from DJ Henke says, is it possible to change it back to the behavior of Cubase 12? So it functions differently. So if you're, again, doing MIDI tracks, it's probably a more desirable output. If you're doing, if you're doing a lot of multi-timbral expansions of VST instrument tracks, then just set it to channel 2. All right, so you see Soren just said, added nice comments about the live streams and YouTube content. In Dom's latest video. Thanks for doing that. Great. All right, so you see, okay, from DJ Henke, it says it's a naming behavior he wants. Let me just reread the question. So if you want to make several MIDI channels at once and name them MIDI 02, the naming would start with 02 to say 03. Okay, so it's all right. So let me check the naming conventions here. Okay, so I'll remove these tracks. Sorry for misunderstanding. All right, so let's come over here to add MIDI tracks, and I'm going to give it a name. So we'll say MIDI 02. Okay, and let's add several tracks. Okay, so I see where it's incrementing. Let's see if I add multiple. So here, when I add it, I just put the word MIDI in. It automatically incremented the tracks, but if I put a number, it will add the extension. So it could be. So I will go back over the weekend. I still have Cubase 12 on my personal computer and see if that behavior for naming has changed. But you want it to be like MIDI 02, 03. And there may be a way. So maybe if you don't write in the number itself, because it may add the extension afterwards. But you could probably, so let's say if we call this MIDI 2, okay, we'll add multiple tracks here. Okay, so let's say if you now want it MIDI 01, 02 without that particular 2, you may be able to go into the project logical editor. Let's see if we could. We're going to transform, say, inner type is going to be set to track, and we want to name you say erase after see if we could erase erase front character 2. Let's see. So let's say if I come here, I could just say let's erase before the 0 here. Do everything. So you could say, replace search string with 2. So if you find it's always doing it, you could make a MIDI logical editor preset, or I'm sorry, just not a MIDI, but a project logical editor preset. So you could, let's say, replace. So you could maybe play around with that as well and see if that helps. But I will make a note to check on the naming behavior of the earlier ones as well. All right, so you see Justin, or Just Askin says Greg's been at this for decades with Cubase. I remember when he came to Orlando for an in-person live stream. It was probably around 2002. Yeah, so I've probably been going to Orlando. I think first time I went to Orlando is 1992. I think my first trip to Orlando was actually right in the middle of Hurricane Andrew. So it was with a bunch of people that lived in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood area in southern Florida. So even then it was a crazy storm in Orlando. So, but I haven't been Orlando probably since COVID. So we're going down doing some work for Electronic Arts. But yeah, I miss going down there. I used to do a lot of stuff at YRS MIDI Systems with George. It's a new location. All right, so we see from She Got Some Knockers. Update UI for Cubase 16 Pro, more drag and drop features, more improvements to pattern editor, better console UI. Please let me know. There's a lot of drag and drop stuff that's already in there that a lot of people don't know. So, if we want to come over to, let's say a VST instrument, I could just drag an instrument over. We can drag presets over, audio files over. So if I want to come over to, let's say I have an audio file here, and I want to go to like a track preset, an audio track preset, I could drag that over. I could drag effects over as well. So all this is, so if I say, okay, let's come over here to an audio, let's go to, let's say, an effect. I could say, okay, I just want the DJ EQ on that particular track. We can just drag it automatically implements it. If I want this EQ in the middle, I could drag and drop that. So let me know if there's like specific things that you want to drag and drop. If there's something on the pattern editor you're not understanding, or with the mix console. I think a lot of people appreciate kind of the flexibility of the GUI. Then we open up kind of a larger project. Right, so let's say if I go to my mix console here, we can, just pop, I could click and adjust the EQ, move away, the EQ disappears. We can, custom tailor a lot of different things. We could just have, we have exclusivity on one particular part. I could come over here. I can, scroll very easily in the mix console using my mouse scroll wheel. We could open up. I want to see my sends and inserts simultaneously with my channel EQ. I want to right click, go to my setup sections, and I want to see my modulators. And let's say I want to come over to my channel strip. So even now, when I click on my channel strip, I could just open up the channel strip module right here and edit and just say, okay, now I want to come over here and one click and you're right away. So let me know if there's like specific things. So sometimes when people just say, I want this updated, there's a lot of stuff that's there that maybe don't know about. And if there's stuff that's missing, we'd love to hear so that, on very specific, if you could be more specific, that would be helpful for us. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup. We'll be starting about 13 minutes. Great. So you see just asking just says, yeah, that was live streaming before there was live streaming. Yeah, so I used to fly pretty constantly. I have I have over 3.5 million miles just on American Airlines from like live streams in person. So, a lot of fun. I got to see so many amazing parts of America and the world doing this. So we see just asking says memory serves as an Altamont Springs at a school gymnasium or maybe in a big library meeting room, thinking more than 20 years. Yeah, so we used to I did a couple, I think I did 2 or 3 seminars at the Seminole County Public Library off of, I think, Fern Road, if memory serves right. So just around a corner. So yeah, lots of fun. Remember that it was in Castleberry. Right off like Fern Road, by kind of near the High Lie there. All right, so we see from the Estes family, 1, 2, 3 just says excellent. So great to see you on. This not sure if this is Amy and Chris or is their daughter. So great to have you on. All right, let me go to another question mailed in. All right, so it says, Greg, what is happening in Groove Agent when Groove Agent common content sounds are not showing as not available? And they're kind of sent a screenshot. Let me see if I still have that. So this is the screenshot they showed, and we see these kind of red, these red circles. Generally, when we see red circles like this, it means that there's no license with it. So I was trying to figure this out. I'm not sure if this is from Media Bay or if this is from inside a Groove Agent. So let me just open it up here. We'll take a look. Okay, so when I come over here, let's open up the Groove Agent. So I found kind of the minimal, so looking at this screenshot, and again, I see the minimal kit 01, and these kind of look like audio samples. When we're here, not sure if, like, these don't look, so we see percussion 1, percussion 2. I don't think that particular icon is for an audio file. So I see the Groove Agent common content. But generally, like if I'm inside of Groove Agent, and we go to kits, so let's say this is in like Beat Agent, we see this particular icon. When we go to instruments, so we see the instruments here. All right? So let's say when I come here, so generally, so we see that this is like the clap 1, clap crash, hi-hat closed. So let's, all right, so mine is showing up here. So generally when you get a message like that, that's indicating that there's no license for it, I would check to, make sure, like if we go to the Steinberg download assistant here, all right, so let's say if we come over to, right, so if we go to, let's say we'll go to, you may see under all of your products, but let's get to, maybe under VST instruments and plugins, let's find Groove Agent. Great. So let's say we'll go to Groove Agent SE6. And then you're going to have, like, those are in. Great. So let's see, we have just the instrument here. And then you may, let's see if we go under Cubase. And we go to virtual instruments and libraries. So here you may see it couldn't hurt just to make sure that you have installed all of the Groove Agent SE content. So I would try to reinstall that, but generally that's going to run under the Cubase license. But just make sure that it can't hurt to install that. But when you see that red line through it, that's generally indicating that there's no license for that. So, but when we go to, but you see on mine by default, it's showing up as working. So, maybe it's missing content. So you could check to see if you go to even the Steinberg Library Manager. I'm sorry, wrong one. And we go to the Groove Agent kits. See if you have the Beat Agent GA4 SE or the Beat Agent GA4. See if you have those installed as well, because it may be referencing something that's not installed. So just check to make sure, like those, because the minimal kits show up in that particular library. So I would check that. Okay, so next question we had. Hi, Greg. Thanks for your explanation on live stream yesterday. I think I explained it wrong. I don't mean to folder color. My issue is when I drag my colored MIDI tracks into a folder in Cubase 14 Pro, the MIDI tracks turn gray while the instrument track keeps its original color. Is there a way to keep the original MIDI track colors when moving them into a folder? Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so I have a folder here. I have both instrument. I have 2 instrument tracks, 3 MIDI tracks. They're all colored here. So I'm going to now drag these tracks in. So according to this email, looks like the MIDI tracks into the folder, the MIDI tracks turn gray automatically. So I'm going to drag these into the folder. And we can see that now they're all just both the MIDI and instrument tracks are assuming the color. So let's say if I undo that, let's adjust a preference that we looked at earlier, where we go to, you'd say with group channel. Let's see if this makes any difference. So now when I drag these over, but it still seems like both the MIDI and the audio are automatically assuming the color of that. So let's say never. When I do this, all of the colors, they don't seem to turn gray. They still retain all of their individual track colors here. But once again, as we mentioned on Tuesday's live stream, if we come over to our settings, it could be when you go into user interface, the track and mix console channels. If this is the default color, let me see what happens if I add a folder track. So I'm going to undo that. Let me add a folder track. And if my folder track is now no color, so I'll take this folder track out and I move. So I'm going to move instrument and audio tracks to a folder track that has no color. It's still maintaining the color for me on both MIDI and instrument tracks. But if I'm doing this wrong, send me another email and I'd be happy to see if I could get it figured out for you. All right, let's gonna start our Zoom here in about a minute. Great, so let's jump back to some live questions. I'm gonna go ahead and paste the Zoom details here for the meeting. And it's also in the Discord. All right, so we see from Soul Sound Official. All right, so we see question, is there a way to see the plugins in the bottom window and be able to have its controls in there? And is there an update for the old plugin similar to the new plugins GUI? So currently the plugin, the lower zone, we can see like, event editors, the drum machine, sampler control, but we don't see a full channel strip. So if you're looking for this, so the plugins, as we go to open up a plugin, will, like the default behavior is when you open up a plugin that it will pop open. It's not docked into the lower zone. So those will be kind of free floating windows because many plugins may not fit into the size of the lower zone. So I think that's pretty much the concept there, that, it's not going to fit into the lower zone, and we don't want to truncate. Some plugins are resizable, some aren't. So that's something to be aware of. All right, so we see, I'll do this as last question from the Estes family, 123. Says there's a persistent bug that happens whenever we write automation. Write automation is thanked on a channel, and to send or mute is clicked on while the track is playing. The GUI jumps to a different channel. Wait, let me just see if I could recreate this. Right, and let me just put sends on these particular tracks. Okay. Whenever rate automation is ticked on an audio channel, so I'm going to come over here to automation. Okay. And descend or mute is clicked on while track is playing. GUI jumps to a different channel. All right, so let's say I'm automating. I have like this channel, automating it. All right, so let's say if I jump, I'll go ahead and automate mutes. And let's say my send amount. So we see whenever it's ticked, maybe ticked on a channel and a sender mute is clicked on, the track is playing, the GUI jumps to a different channel. All right, so we see that that's stayed in that. I'm going to jump to a different channel and we just take it out of loop mode. So now I want to do automation on this selected channel. All right, so we're in audio O2, so let's automate. See the automation going here, mute. Let's open up an EQ. Okay, let's go to our send. So it hasn't seemed to kind of jump and select a different channel. Let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you're doing. All right, so we see a quick note from Flyv, just says in studio setup, there are also 2 ins and outs for each part in the MIDI port setup. Yeah, so, maybe make sure that, you have, if one may be for the MIDI keys, one may be for the MIDI remote, make sure you don't have any of the ports doubly assigned. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and start our Zoom. So once again, let's get our Zoom started here, and it's a great way to meet other people that are on the live streams. So let's go ahead and open it up. Great. We'll get this started. Great. Okay. Hey, Wilfried. Good to see you. Yep, we can hear you, Wilfried. Yes, we can. Great. Yeah, it should be good. Great. We have Soren joining. Yeah, I think, Wilfried, we may have an echo coming from your setup. And maybe also you, Klaus. Hey, how's it going? Yeah. Mhm. All right. Yeah. All right. I'll give it another minute for people to migrate over from the live stream. To export a MIDI track out of the project. Hang on a second, Tim. I'll wrap up the live stream here. All right. Sorry, I think you're responding to the echo. I'm going to mute you, Wilfried. Sorry, it's an alternate reality. All right. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to end the live stream, and we'll migrate over to Zoom. All right. All right. Live stream is over. We're all on Zoom now. All right.